Hello and welcome to the Life Fit podcast. I'm your host, Jack O'Halloran, and today I am joined with my dear friend Louise George. Louise George is a senior yoga teacher, FRC Mobility Specialist, Counsellor in anxiety and eating disorders, random talker, kitchen dancer, mother, wife and lover of life. You can find her work at douglasyogacentre.ie or on Instagram with yoga_with_Louise. We will discuss in depth how she dealt with her own eating disorders and came out the other side to be able to help people in similar situations, as well as how she dealt with some very big grievances in her life to end up where she is now, in Cork, Ireland, running her own yoga studio. I'm sure, like me, you will absolutely adore Louise's openness, honesty and authenticity as we discuss further things such as the power of yoga, the power of connection, and even menopause, which was quite a challenge for me as a 28-year-old male. I'm most certainly not that experienced in it, but Louise shed absolutely wonderful light on it. If you like the show, be sure to subscribe. You can find us on Instagram at LifeFit Studios or my personal page, that's at jackohalloran_IE. Our website is also lifefitstudios.ie, or you can find us on Patreon, where every donation counts to sustaining this show, and we are the Life Fit podcast there. So without further ado, I invite you to open up your ears, your heart, and enjoy the show. Hello, Louise George. How are you today?
I'm very good this morning. Thank you, Jack.
Excellent. You're enjoying the sunshine?
I am. It's beautiful, isn't it? Fabulous.
Absolutely savage. I hope you have your factor 50 on the go, have you?
Not quite at that level yet, no.
Not quite at that level. Louise, you prompted me earlier on, you kind of caught me off guard, in regards to how we met. You might tell our audience how exactly that was.
Well, I was thinking about this morning, and what it was I was on Instagram. I hadn't been on Instagram for very long, but was it 2000 and when did we have the really bad snow that year? Was it 2018? And I decided to do something really silly and ran out into the garden in my swimming costume and started doing headstands and things like that in the garden. And you saw me do that and you decided you would do it too, and you posted a picture of you on Instagram doing a headstand, if I remember rightly, in your underpants. So then we kind of made friends on Instagram, and then I think we met for coffee and lunch, and that's how we met.
Yeah, I think that was 2017. Was it the end of February? Big snow. So who'd have thought that me and my mankini would have brought us all together, huh?
I know. Yeah. Our mutual crazy sense of humour, I think, was what did it.
Both making the most out of adversity. I think that's what holds us in good regard. Yeah, and I suppose it went from there to many discussions over maybe what were thought to be short lunches, but probably ended up being 2 and 3 hour conversations.
Yes, I think so. Definitely the last time. I think they closed, didn't they? Didn't they close the veranda? Staff were ready to go home.
We may have been kicked out.
Yeah.
Kicking and screaming. So Louise, we might, I suppose, move on to introducing you to our audience, and kind of if anyone doesn't know you and hasn't heard your story, you might introduce us, I suppose, to where it all began for you, and kind of what's led you to where you are today.
Okay. Wow. Where to start? I guess, I'm a yoga teacher. My name's Louise George. I'm a yoga teacher in Cork, but I'm English and grew up in the gritty north of England in a little town called Burnley, little mill town. But I had a pretty unremarkable childhood. Everything was fairly, pretty good growing up. But at around age 18 or 19, I became anorexic. And I suppose for me, that's really where my journey started. I was at university and just kind of fell into an eating disorder, really. Went on a diet. I'd gained a little bit of weight. You go off to uni and you're eating all the junk food and drinking all the drinks. And decided to go on a diet and just kind of fell headfirst into what was an eating disorder that lasted for years, really, and really is, I would say, it's shaped my whole life.
And have you pinpointed since what kind of started all of that? What was there, as you said, you had a pretty unremarkable childhood, but was there any particular things that might have started it?
Yeah, well, I think personality traits. I mean, I've since gone on to work with people with eating disorders, and especially with anorexia. What I know is true is that a lot of those people will have personality traits in common. So I was a pretty sensitive child. I was quite empathic. I had tendencies to be a bit perfectionistic. I'm certainly an overthinker. I guess my self-esteem wasn't probably the best, and I had high expectations of myself. And I think those are personality traits that can cause us all problems, but especially with anorexia, they seem to be, they'll often preempt that issue. But I also came from a family that weren't very good at communication, so feelings weren't discussed very openly, and everything was, not that it was brushed under the carpet, but it wasn't openly talked about. So I guess when I started to struggle in my teens, which a lot of teens do, with self-esteem and confidence, and I didn't know how to talk about it, and so I kind of turned that all inwards and tried to cope the only way I knew how, which at that time became through food. And I think that's pretty common. I mean, I think we all have days where we'll, eat a bit of junk food because we're feeling crappy. But for me, it just really took hold.
And were you bulimic in the sense, were you getting sick after meals and things like that? How were you? How were you getting into the depths of it?
Yeah, no, it started off, like I said, it was, I was dieting, and then dieting is hard. And so I went through phases there where I would make myself sick. And then I would think, well, I might as well, if I'm going to be sick, eat everything and then be sick. And so then that would turn into binges. And then I would go back into periods of restriction. And then after a couple of years, it became more about restriction and calorie counting. And I mean, I got to the point where I think I was weighing lettuce to calculate the calories and individual salad ingredients. And, it was really kind of obsessive. But that's the nature of anorexia. It's very much about control. So that kind of got a grip in the end. But it was really all through university that I was struggling. And just as we were finishing university, there was a night that I think it was Christmas Eve, actually, and I was on a night out, and my friends had been, to be fair, they were worrying, and they'd been saying to me, Louise, you don't look well, and I couldn't hear it because I was so stuck in this behaviour. I didn't want to change. But we went out one night, and when have you ever been to a nightclub and they've got mirrors and they're angled so that you can see yourself maybe from the side or from the back, and I just turned around in this split second and I saw myself in a mirror. And I was like, oh shit, that's me. And it wasn't what I thought that I looked like. So I just had this clarity, this moment of clarity where I realized I was really getting dangerously thin and that I just looked pitiful, really. I'm like, my head looked too big for my body and my little legs were, that was the moment where I kind of realized I've really got to do something. So it was a good few years of struggle then, but got there in the end.
So at that time, you mentioned you were studying, and that wasn't the counselling at the time, was it? What were you studying during that time?
No, I was at university. I was doing a degree in sociology and psychology and communication studies. Like, I've always been really interested in people and what makes them tick. I was always, I think I was like the one in the playground, where there'd be two people fighting and I'd get in the middle and kind of say, look, see it from his point of view. He's just feeling like this. And can we not be friends and talk this through? So I was always that person that would be mediating in the middle of an argument in the playground. And I think I've always leaned towards, being curious about what makes people the way they are. So I was at university studying that, but at the same time, really sort of doing a bit of my own self-analysis, I think,
Yeah, and it's kind of, I think that's a common theme with people who are helping others, is that they and we and myself included, we can often patch ourselves up in order to go out and help the soldiers, or go out and help everyone else without looking internally. And maybe there is a link with it, and I'm not sure I believe in coincidence, but you mentioned maybe there was an issue around communication at home, and that,
Yeah, I think so. And, I was very close to my mum, and, my mum struggled with anxiety really. And I think she probably there was certainly a time in her life where she was a little bit depressed. But my dad is very, kind of emotionally detached. He's very straightforward man. He wouldn't be big into talking about feelings, which I think is not unusual. But I just was such a sensitive child, and I think I was quite deep, and I think I was quite emotional, and I think I picked up things quite a lot from people, and I just didn't know how to manage that. And I guess going away from home when I was 18, I mean, I was well up for university. I was like, watch out, Liverpool, here I come. And I was full of, gung ho. But within really a few months of getting there, I think I was probably overwhelmed with all of the different people I was meeting, and, the expectations. And, yeah, I don't know, but I certainly feel now in retrospect, certainly as I've got older and I've had my own kids, you start to really see how family dynamics and family systems of communication, they have a huge effect on us all growing up.
absolutely.
So yeah, there's no blame anywhere in any of it. I don't, it's just how it is. But I think I probably needed to have an environment where I was encouraged to talk a little bit more, because it took me a long time to learn how to do that.
And you mentioned, I suppose, you had that turnaround moment on Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
Would the fact that it was Christmas, and I can imagine maybe for people with an eating disorder, that all this pressure around, all the boxes of roses and the chocolates and the dinner.
Huge at Christmas. I think probably that was obviously, I mean, Christmas was always hard, and I still think about people that are struggling with eating disorders at not just even Christmas, but January, with this whole lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks. And it's so hard for everybody, but I think women especially, get bombarded by these messages in magazines and adverts on the telly, and it's everywhere all the time. But I think probably there was just a part of me, I think I was 5'12" or something. And I think I probably knew that I was getting to the end, that it was a battle, and I was tired. And not only that, but my muscles were weak, and I was, my bladder was weak. Things were starting to go. And I think probably I was ready to see what I needed to see that night, and I made a promise to myself then that I would turn things around. But it's hard. It's hard to let go of that control. It was really hard, and it took me years.
So you came home that night. What was, had you strategized? Had you said, okay, look, if I can do one thing today or tomorrow, what kind of process did you begin once you had that realization?
Well, I think I remember getting up on Christmas Day and weighing myself. That's why I know that I was, 5'12" or something. And then really, I suppose I went back to university. It was the last kind of last bit of university. I was 20-ish, 21, whatever. So the last few months, and I found a counsellor, and I found a dietitian in Liverpool, which is where I was at university, and just started baby steps. Like, because I was so obsessed with calorie counting, there's no way I was just going to suddenly start to eat more. So I actually quite regimentally increased my calories week by week and monitored my weight. And when I realized that I wasn't ballooning, I got more confident in adding in more calories, and just bit by bit, I kind of worked my way back up. And, I think I was like, I don't know, 8 stone, 8.5 stone, something like that, nearly, after a year or so. And then decided it would be a great idea to go off traveling, backpacking, and very promptly lost a lot of that again. But, yeah.
And where did you jet off to?
Well, I had a notion that I'd go to Australia and work for a year. I'd been working, actually, after I left university, I got a job in what was the UK's very first local cable TV station. And I was the assistant producer. And we used to take volunteers from the community and train them up to use. I mean, this is why it's so funny that actually, technically, I'm totally incompetent nowadays. But then I was actually making little television programs and putting them out on the local cable TV channel, which is insane when I think back to it. We had an outside broadcast unit and everything. And we used to train up the local people to make programs. So I was making, my series were Young at Heart, where I had 2 senior citizen presenters, and we used to go out and make programs for senior citizens. And I had another program called Out and About in East Lancashire, which we used to go out and video. Like, if, say, for example, you had kids in a school and they were putting on a show, we might actually go out and record the whole show and put it out on cable TV. It was brilliant. So I worked there for a year or two, and then I got made redundant, and I had this notion that I'd go and work in Australia. But my boyfriend at the time was also working for this cable TV company. He was the director and I was his producer. And he decided he would pack in his job and come with me. So what we did was we booked a round the world ticket together. And actually a friend of his came as well. And we went off, headed out to Thailand, and we were gone for 9 months.
And by this time, had you left the sociology and things like that? Had you left college or?
Yeah, I'd left university. I'd kind of put a little bit of weight on. I'd got this job. Actually, I worked as a volunteer for 6 months in this cable company, and then they took me on. So then they hired me, and so I had been there, I don't know, for a year or something. So I was 22 or 23 at this point. And so myself and Michael went off travelling. And then I suppose the really sad part of this is that Michael ended up, when we got to Australia, he'd been having a lot of symptoms for the last few months, the last few weeks of the trip. And I got him to Australia and got him to a doctor. And he actually got diagnosed with a brain tumour.
Wow.
So that was a bit of a shock to us. And we had to fly straight back. So he actually passed away 6 months later. And that was probably, like I say, I'd lost a bit of weight when we were traveling. I kind of slid back a little bit. But when that happened, and Michael was such a healthy person, like he wasn't a smoker, he wasn't a drinker, he was vegetarian, he looked after his health. I think that was when I kind of realized that your health isn't something you can take for granted. And it really hit home to me that I was taking huge risks with my health. And here was Michael, had his life taken from him. He was only 29. So that really gave me a massive kick up the backside. And I thought to myself, I owe it to myself, but I also felt I owed it to Michael to really just sort my head out and once and for all, put it behind me. So that's sort of what I did, really.
Yeah. Well, geez, that's a very sad thing to hear. But on the flip side, I suppose for anyone listening who's, maybe suffering things like an eating disorder or suffering things like grieving and stuff like this, you've come out the other side of it. And not only have you had 2 of those things happen in your life, you kind of had them happen in the one area of your life. And the fact that you're kicking and screaming and you're laughing and you're smiling and you're doing what you're doing today, I think is great credit to you, and great credit to the human soul and the human spirit of what we can do when we pick ourselves up,
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, it was a really traumatic time. I mean, not just watching him get sick and have him pass away, but just, 1 minute we're traveling around the world and life's great and we're living the dream, and then all of a sudden I'm back at home in my mum's house in Burnley in my early 20s with just felt like I had nothing, so but that was the point that I thought, when I was traveling, the thing that I love about traveling, and I realize I still love about traveling, is just meeting people from completely different backgrounds, completely different cultures, they've got whole different value systems. It's so interesting to me. And what I realized was that counseling, actually, when a person comes to you, and they might be from your neighborhood, but they still have their own value system, their own view of the world. They're like a whole country, in and of themselves. And I think if I can't travel, and if I'm not traveling, then having people come to me for counseling that sort of kept my enthusiasm and interest going. It's like I just love people's differences, I think. And so the traveling thing was brilliant, but what I realized was that, what I wanted was to kind of get to know people on a deeper level, and like I said before, what makes them tick. So I made the decision, once Michael had passed away, to really follow the counselling track, and I went off and moved away and went and did a full-time advanced, like a postgraduate diploma in counselling, and that was kind of where it started.
That's awesome. And I personally don't think it's a coincidence. You might disagree with me that, you said when you were a young girl in the playground, you were that person who'd like to mitigate. You were, and we often speak about connection, and I know that's a big, big thing for you, that, during all of those hard years in between, let's say when you were that child in the playground to, the eating disorder and the partner passing away and all of that, that had you, at any point, had you kind of lost track of that? Had you, maybe not given it enough credence, not given it enough thought, and then you landed back to it the hard way? Do you ever kind of feel, looking back, that it could have been easier? And if so, would you have taken that easy route or stay with the hard route?
No, I don't. You know what? No, I wouldn't. I don't, and I'm not going to say I don't regret like the things that happened. Well, I don't regret them. I mean, they were hard, and nobody would wish for anybody that you love to pass away, or anybody to suffer, or any of that. But I do have a kind of sense that it was all meant to unravel the way that it did, and that I think had I not have had that eating disorder, I don't think I would have been forced to look inwards to the extent that I was. And I had to do that. I mean, I was a counsellor. I was a fully qualified counsellor by 26. And, I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm young looking now, but I was young looking then. And I mean, to be fair, I looked about 15 and I was counselling people, and people would sometimes say, "How old are you?" And I'd say, "Well, I'm, 26 or 27 or whatever I was." And I think, but, I'd had some life experience. I had done a lot of work. So I'm glad that I went through what I went through when I did, because it gave me a lot, it gave me a lot of insight into myself and a lot of empathy for other people's suffering. That I don't know, can you really have that if you haven't experienced things yourself?
That's it. And it's that whole phenomenon, you have to go through kind of the dirt to find the diamond and find the gold and all of that. And it's, the fact that you did, I would assume, and just even knowing you, you're an incredibly empathetic person. You resonate with people. And it's beautiful that you were able to observe that, love yourself enough to observe that, even though all of that horrible shit was going on. And I suppose I'm not sure
if I did love myself then. I think that's only come in the recent years. I think I just was driven by, I wanted to be useful in society. I wanted to help people, but more than anything, I'm fucking nosy. I'm sorry for the language, but I like to know what people are, thinking and feeling. And I do have this kind of need to connect and feel connected to people. So there's some selfish reasons for wanting to do that job, as well as the wanting to help people. It feeds me. It's like when people are sitting in front of you and they're vulnerable and they're being completely open and honest with you. It's like such a gift. It's to connect to people on that level, that human level, without all of the sort of bullshit of, the niceties and the, talking about the weather. And I mean, that's all great too. But the real deep conversation, that really feeds me. I don't know, So selfish reasons as well. I need that connection with people that on that soul level and on that heartfelt level. It's really it's really important to me.
It's a great point because, that idea of selfishness, look, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if we can all have an ounce of selfishness, and maybe that does kind of come back into self-love, in some sense, but if we can have that selfishness, if we all had it, but towards a greater good, I mean, it kind of enshrined in the idea of love and sharing and that whole idea of, and I know for myself, when you can help somebody, or you can let them give you something, or you can give them something, that's where the butterfly feelings come. It's not
best in the world.
Yeah, it's not that fancy piece of technology, or it's not that it's feeling gratitude from somebody else.
Yeah, and doing the things that you feel passionate about, the things that light you up. I mean, I feel so fulfilled when when I was counselling, and I still do a little bit now, but I'm not doing so much. But just that feeling of a real connection with somebody. Like, what's more important than that in this day and age? I don't think there is anything. I can meet people. I mean, and this is why you and me get on, and why we can sit for 3 hours and talk, because we do connect on that level. But like, I couldn't sit and talk to you for 3 hours about what colour you're planning on painting your kitchen. It's just, I can't. I'm not good at the small. I can do small talk, but it's when we get into that deep stuff that I'm in there then, for hours.
Yeah, it's you know what, I get absolutely bored by it. Questions like, oh, how was your day? What did you do? All of that. It bores the crap out of me. What gives me energy is that kind of, okay, what can I do? What can I go about and fix and change? And how can I be of service? And I think a lot of us are in that space without quite knowing that we want that. And it's a beautiful point you kind of hit on. And kind of getting back in, so you're in that journey. So you just started out with the counselling. That was back in Liverpool, wasn't it?
Yeah, I went back to, actually, that was a really nice kind of turn as well, that I ended up, my first counselling job was in the University of Liverpool, where I had been ill. So I went back there to work in the Department of Psychology in a small eating disorder service they had. And so I actually went back there as a volunteer. I said, look, let me come and work for you for 6 months for free, and you see how I go. I don't know how I funded it. I can't remember what I was doing at the time, but they let me see clients, and they monitored me and obviously supervised me, and then they took me on. So my first job was back in the University of Liverpool, which felt like a full circle, which was really nice. And then that department got closed down, and then I worked for another private eating disorder service, and then I went eventually to work. Actually, I was a counsellor in GP surgeries in the UK for quite a while, which was a fantastic system. So like, if you went to your doctor and, say you were stressed or anxious or depressed, and your doctor realized it was your marriage was breaking down, and you needed to talk. Obviously, most GPs don't have very long to offer you, so they would then send you to me for 6 sessions of counselling, and I would do that within the GP surgery. So I did that for a while, and then I was also working as a specialist eating disorders counsellor in like an outpatient psychology service in a hospital in Merseyside. So I did that for about a decade, I think. So it went on to be quite a nice career.
That's incredible, and again, like, inspiring in the sense of, you ended up working in a service that perhaps before you needed to receive more than give, and that's a really kind of inspiring thing,
And I did find that, I mean, we as a counsellor, we were encouraged not to tell our story to our clients. It's, you keep your own stuff separate. And there's good reasons for that. But I would have clients saying, you seem to understand me so well. Have you been through this? And I'd be like, well, is it important for you to know about what, I kind of deflect the question back. But I think what's really interesting is, since I've been on Instagram, one of my old clients from about, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, found me on Instagram and sent me a private message and said that the fact that she'd asked me outright one time, have you been through anorexia and bulimia? And I just said yes, because I thought she needs to know. Do you know, she's asking me, and I just said yes. And she said, the fact that you told me you had been through it made me feel so hopeful that I could get through it too, because now I'd met somebody who'd recovered. That she went on and very quickly recovered. But I'd left by then, you see, and so I didn't know about this. But she'd actually written me this poem and everything. But it was so nice that she got in touch with me. And she said, the fact that you disclosed to me that it had helped, that you got better, that really helped me the most. And what's nice now that I'm kind of working more as a yoga teacher, I can talk very freely and openly about eating disorders and tell my story and give people that hope. Because I think people need to know that you can come through it, you know, because a lot of people, I've heard people say, once you've got an eating disorder, you've got it for life. And that's just not true. It's really not.
Yeah. And that phenomenon of, you know, inspiration in the sense of, if I can look at anyone who's doing awesome at anything and I can find the similarities between me and them, that will give me the drive to get up in the morning and do the things necessary to become it. And I think that's a huge thing.
Exactly.
I can understand why maybe in a counselling session you're not supposed to project your own problems, but sometimes it may be what the other person needs. So but
you see, like a lot of addiction counsellors would have had addictions, you know. In a way, I suppose it makes sense that you would have been through it. But I think what you just said there is really interesting as well, because the things that kind of took me into anorexia, you know, the overthinker, the perfectionism, the sensitive aspect to my personality, you know, the high expectations of myself, the things that kind of created the problem in the first place actually then became like my strengths. You know, yeah, I'm an overthinker, but it means that I can really think things through. And yes, I'm very sensitive, but it means that I'm sensitive to the person sitting in front of me. You know, yes, I have high expectations of myself, but it means that I'm going to give my client or my student or whoever the best I can of me. You know, if I'm going to create something, it's going to be my best work. And so it's just kind of getting to know yourself and realizing that the things that can create the problems for you, it's just about balance, I guess, isn't it? You know, it's using your strengths and letting them be your superpowers, but not letting them drive you. So like, I know, you know, when I've done courses, for example, and I've got a case study to hand in, I could be up all bloody night, sort of worrying over trying to get this thing perfect. And I've had often people say, just, you've done enough. And I'm like, okay. You know, I've got to know where to draw the line. But as you get to know yourself, you get better at that. But it's, you know, I don't see those qualities as negative qualities. I see them as real pluses. But, you know, they were the very parts of my personality that did make me ill at one point. So I suppose it's just knowing how to balance it.
it's a very kind of interesting point on focus, isn't it? They say, like, you ask any kind of good driver, if you were driving along a snowy road and you're veering off course about to hit a tree, if you look at the tree versus if you look for the way out, you know, you're going to hit one. The car will follow the way out. It's the same if you're riding a horse and the horse isn't very experienced, and if you're looking at the jump, there's a good chance that horse will stop at the jump. Whereas if you look beyond it, so our focus in that sense is huge. And I suppose tying back into those perhaps more evidently in the early sessions when you were doing the counselling, did you ever get that sensation that as you were articulating your thoughts and their thoughts and so on, that there was an element of you kind of therapizing yourself through or channeling through the person in front of you?
I think my best sessions with people are, and actually this is the same, even teaching yoga. Sometimes I say things and I think, I don't know where that came from, but it just came out of my mouth. And I think, yeah, actually that made sense. And I think sometimes when I'm counseling people, I pick up things and I voice them, and I don't know where I've got that information from. And I think, I mean, it's a big question that you've asked there. Like, there's a few elements to that. I think, obviously, when I'm telling people, or, you know, not telling people, but talking to people about how best they can cope, I'm also reminding myself. I mean, that's one of the nice things about working as a counsellor. You're constantly having to check in with yourself. You're constantly having to monitor where you are and they are. So it's keeping you very present. And you're having to listen in so intently that, yeah, I think we do pick up things from the client, but also from within ourselves. You know, we get those kind of moments of wisdom, and difficult to say where it comes from. It's just a really interesting process, but I think it's about being very present and really listening in. But you see, I mean, this ties in with something you said before about about loving myself or whatever. I think for a long time, my focus was always on the client, in terms of I'm here to help them.
I suppose what I was kind of getting at, that idea of, you know, when we're having a deep conversation or you're having a real meaningful interaction, be it in a counselling session or be it in a real conversation, it's nearly like you're articulating it for yourself in the hope that the other person is coming along with you.
Yeah, I think I'm generally I'm picking things up from them, you know, but I think that we're all the same. And this is one of the things that working as a counsellor has given me, is that, you know, in terms of, I mean, I put things out on Instagram, myself dancing in the kitchen, you know, just silly stuff. And I've had a lot of people saying to me, oh my God, I couldn't do that. I'd be so worried what people think about me. And I think the fact that I've worked for so long as a counsellor, and I've been in that situation where people come and they're very vulnerable and they're very honest, and they say to you, oh, I have these terrible thoughts, or, you know, I'm an awful person for thinking like this, or I did that thing and I feel so guilty about it. And people tell you a lot of stuff, and you just, what you hear is the same things over and over again. You know, you hear people voicing the same fears, the same vulnerabilities, the same hopes and dreams, the same worry that they're not lovable, or there's something about them that's not good enough, that they're going to fail and everybody's going to think they're, you know, a failure. Everybody has really the same, we're all the same, you know, and I think whether I've been counselling somebody that's a CEO of a big company and they've got all this powerful role, when they come behind a closed door and they say to you, I feel like I'm 10 years old and I'm going to fuck it all up and I'm scared, you know, you then realize that we are literally all the same. And I think that for me, that's allowed me to really be free with who I am. And like doing this interview with you now, there is nothing, Jack, that I wouldn't tell you about me. I don't have any secrets, honestly and truly. There's nothing in my life that I feel guilty or ashamed about, because I've met enough people to know that they all feel that same way too, that we are all the same, that if we're just, like you said to me before we started the interview, you know, the more honest we are, the better that is for everybody. What's the point in trying to pretend that we're something that we're not, or that we're perfect, or that we've got it all together and, you know, got all the shit going on? We've all got our cracks. And actually, that's what I like about people. If I get into a conversation with you and everything is good and everything is perfect and everything is fine, I'm bored, honestly. I want to know about the cracks. I want to, you know what I mean?
And if we are out in that periphery of a conversation and, you know, we're talking about the weather and we're talking about these things, sure, where can we target and where can we say, okay, well, I can be of service to this person and I can help them connect with their inner self and all this. And that's maybe why it's such bullshit.
And how do you connect? If you're talking about stuff on a surface level, how do you connect to that person on a, you know, I mean, I think of people on a soul level, like, you know, I think that's getting a bit deep maybe, but I do. I think there are moments with people and I go, oh, I feel like I saw that real person, the glimmer of that soul, that real kind of deeper. And when you're talking about all that surface shit, I mean, we have to talk about that, and there's a place for that. We don't want to always be in the deep stuff. But if I never get to the deep stuff, meh,
Yeah.
I'm probably not going to hang around for long.
Yeah. And it's like kind of, this observation of, let's say if you go way out into the mountains and you go for a walk, and if you're alone or with someone, it doesn't really matter, but you can look out into the abyss and, you can say, right, it's the year 2020, but it's no different to the year 202 or 48 BC or so on.
Yeah.
And we're so insignificant that we
Yeah.
hold on to this ego, this identity, that we're trying to compare with everyone and everything else. And, oh my God, that person is doing that. I'd be totally embarrassed and so on.
Yeah.
But it's our insignificance that can liberate us to be significant and as significant as we want.
Absolutely. And once you really take that on, it's such a good feeling. It's like you're free, isn't it? You can just be whoever you're meant to be. And that's the thing, is that why would we all want to be the same? Like, why would you want to be like, Fred down the road, or, it's so stupid. We've got these individual gifts. And I think now that my gifts are, as I said, the very things that took me into anorexia. They just kind of went a bit into overdrive then. But they are my gifts, my sensitivity and my empathy and all of those, my willingness and need to connect. They're my gifts. So it's good to kind of realize that and embrace that. And I think yoga was the next, like for me, I mean, just to finish off, like, I worked in the UK then for 10 years. I met a guy, we got married, we had kids. And then my husband is from Kerry, and he got offered a promotion back in Ireland, in Cork, and I was kind of like, I was a bit burnt out with the work that I was doing. I'd been doing it for 10 years or 12 years or whatever, and thought, okay, look, this is change, and change is good. And I'm going to a different country and a different culture, and this is an adventure. And so I came with an open mind and an open heart, and we moved over here in 2007. But it just so happened that my mum was just dying at the time from a battle with cancer, and I was really, because, like, as I said before, my mum was like the closest person to me, and during the time where I'd been recovering from my eating disorder, she'd been like my best friend. She was almost like my counsellor for a while. Like, I would just talk at her. I'd follow her around the house going, yeah, and I feel like this, and she'd be like, okay. I mean, she was brilliant. But so when she was ill, that was really difficult. And then she literally died about 10 weeks after I'd moved to Cork.
Wow.
So I found myself in Ireland, which, honestly and truly, although I'd visited Ireland, I didn't think that it would be a big change, but actually it was massive. And I found myself here. I'd never been to Cork really before. Didn't have any friends here, didn't have any family here, any connection here, hadn't got a job. Found out that my counselling qualification didn't transfer to the Irish, Counselling Association. They didn't recognise it, even though it was accredited in the UK. And I just thought, I have nothing. All of a sudden, I felt, talking about connection, completely disconnected from everything that I knew, my job, my friends, my family, my mum especially. And I was grieving. And I remember walking out into the street. I'd been home. My mum had died, and it was right this time of year. It was April, beginning of April. And I came back to Cork, and I walked out into the street. The kids were playing out. They were only 5 and 2 or something. And one of the neighbours came over, and she said, oh, hi, you've just moved in, and welcome to the street, and which was lovely. And I just burst into tears and went, my mum just died. And I was completely lost. And that was a really dark time for me. I felt like I'd made a mistake coming, and I felt like I was a bit stuck here, and I was just a bit lost. So that's really when the yoga came in. So, like, I'd had friends in the UK who'd said, do yoga. And I was like, oh, I'm too stressed to do yoga, or I'm too busy to do yoga, or I just didn't get it. And, but when I came here, what I started doing was, because I knew I was struggling, and I had this this hyperventilation thing going on where I felt like I couldn't catch my breath, and I kept sighing and yawning and trying to get a full breath and gasping for air. And it was all stress related and grief related. I think they say actually that grief sits in your lungs. So I was going to meet with this guy who was a Buteyko breathing specialist. I don't know if you know anything about Buteyko breathing. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
And then I was going for Reiki, and I was going to some kind of chanting. I don't even know what it was, but it was like a group of people that were meeting, and they were singing chants. And then I started doing yoga, but I was so stressed at the time that when they'd get to the relaxation for the last 5 minutes, I used to leave before it. I used to actually nod at the teacher and go, "Thanks very much," and I'm off. And I'd think, "Oh, I've done the important bit. I'm not lying down there for 5 or 10 minutes," because every time I'd lie down, I'd cry.
That's the scary part, isn't it? Yeah, the quietness.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually couldn't. I couldn't be still. I couldn't at that point be with myself. So there was a huge learning. Eventually, forced myself to stay for the relaxation and did the crying through the relaxation. And then I kind of started to go, okay, so really everything that I'm doing, breath, chanting, the yoga postures, the relaxation, it is all yoga. So maybe what I should do is do more yoga. So I actually signed up for teacher training, which probably was a ridiculous thing to do because I hadn't been doing yoga for that long. I'd only been doing it for 6 months or a year by then. But I just knew instinctively that it was going to be good for me. And, you know, the thing that it really gave me was the community. They were all women actually in my class, I think, but a group of women that were honest and open. And, you know, they were seeking something more. They were interested in spirituality. So I kind of found my tribe, and that really helped me. I mean, teaching yoga was never on my agenda. It was never something that I wanted to do, even though my mum had always said to me, "I think you should be a teacher. I think you should teach." And I was like, no. I'm all about one-to-one. I'm not teaching anything. But as part of the course, you have to teach. So, and then I go, do you know what? I actually quite enjoy this. And I remember teaching a class that we used to teach classes with the other people from the course, teach each other, practice on each other. And then there was one night where, you know, somebody from the public came into my class, and I was like, oh shit, now I've got to teach it like I'm a real teacher. And she loved it. And actually she's a yoga teacher now, which is interesting. But the fact that she went away and she said, "I feel so much better. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it." I was like, wow, I'm helping people again. So then I went on and started teaching.
Awesome. And I suppose on behalf of, and I think I can speak for all of Cork and all of our audience, I mean, the gratitude I can even feel from hearing you go through that whole ordeal, and even the second time around, by the time you come to Ireland. And thank bloody God you connected and you reconnected, and it's now manifesting through your work, and you're able to share, you're able to chat. Your silky smooth voice is relaxing people many days of the week. Maybe not at the moment with Corona, but you know, and I think again,
I actually just recorded 2 relaxations. I'm going to splash them all over the internet.
we'll get that plug in later. People will know exactly where to find it. But you know, it's that, in a sense, no, not that I'm grateful for all the terrible things that happened to you, but in one sense I am, because it's brought you to what you're doing now, to what you're able to give. And for anyone listening who has either been through shit, you know, is currently going through shit, or will go through shit, I want you to kind of own in on that, you know, and own in on that phenomenon. It's where we can turn our focus to. Sometimes we get just by the grace of God or whatever, that an opportunity lands our way and we find our path. Sometimes we have to dig a little deeper, but it's there. It's there for us.
Yeah.
You know, it's always there. It'll bounce back.
It is, but it is shit when you're in it. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Those first few years that I lived in Ireland were really hard. And, you know, I couldn't put my finger on why, I mean, obviously there was a lot of grief. I think I was so connected to my friends in Liverpool and my job and my work. It was just a much bigger loss. There's a lot more grief than I thought there would be. I thought I travelled the world. I'm fine. I travelled around Vietnam on my own for a month or so, and it's not a bother to me. I didn't expect that I would, but I think losing my mum just took the rug from under me because she really was my anchor. And I think those first few years were shit. But I mean, yeah, it's really come to fruition now. And what's that? That's 12 years ago now, And I mean, I've got my own yoga studio. Who would have thought 12 years ago that I would have ended up with my own yoga studio and teaching yoga full time? And,
had I known you then, I probably would have guessed it.
Well, I didn't. You know what I mean? But it's just amazing, really. And you don't know what the future holds. And I am always hopeful, even in this current, all of this awful stuff that's going on with the coronavirus. And I still have that part of me that thinks something is going to change for the better. And actually, do you know, I closed my yoga studio, obviously, because of this. And after a week of being off, I was like, wow, I actually feel better than I felt for years. And it's because I normally teach 3 or 4 yoga classes a week in the evening till 10 o'clock at night. I'm in the studio at least 4 nights a week. And, in the winter time, our natural body clock really is to be winding down and going to bed earlier and maybe sleeping longer. And I'm down in the studio going against that, really, doing quite strong classes and strong movement. And it's really made me think, maybe I need to change some things about my lifestyle. And so who knows what's going to come from this? I mean, I'm always open to really the most important thing to me in life, apart from connection, is growing. Just want to feel like I'm constantly learning and growing. And I think you're the same, aren't you? It's like if you're learning something and you're changing and you're growing and you're developing in some way or other, then things are good. If I'm stagnant and I'm static, which is, I suppose, what I thought I was when I first came to Ireland, I'm suddenly not working and I'm, just at home with the kids and I'd lost my direction. I thought I was stagnating, but I wasn't. But as long as I'm learning and growing, I'm good. Think. And as long as I'm around people that inspire me and people that are also interested in growing and learning and being honest and real, I'm good. But it took me a while to find those people, of which you're obviously one, Jack.
Oh, thank you very much. It's I mean, the coronavirus now is this is the current ball being thrown in our face. And obviously, as you've mentioned, you've had plenty of them. Plenty of different adversities, and I have too, in my own right. But it's this, this idea of how we get over it. And look, if I were to throw a ball at somebody's face and, it hit them in the face and they started crying and they said, oh, you're a bollocks because you threw a ball in my face. And if I'd done it again and a third time and a fourth time, at a certain point, the person has to realize that maybe they should duck, maybe they should catch the ball, hit it away, so on. It's that out of these adversities comes huge opportunity, a huge chance for readaptation or for even just getting going in life.
It's just, and I think, nobody saw this coming. I think it's something we haven't been able to prepare for. So I think people are, it does pull the rug from under your feet, and we're all having to think on our feet, and we're all trying to find ways to keep going, and it's just a huge learning curve, and that's always hard. But I mean, we just hopefully there will be good to come out of it. It's there's just always last year I was just thinking about this there. I mean, last year I turned 50, and I started to struggle with my energy levels and my hormone levels changing. I mean, I think I'm, I think I'm 35 or something. I didn't for a minute think that I was coming towards menopause, but that was a curveball for me. I was like, what the heck is wrong with me? Why am I waking up feeling exhausted? Why am I shouting at my kids? Why am I feeling like my life is suddenly over? What are these depressing thoughts? It took me ages. I actually, because I talk very openly about everything. Went into a class one day with my students. We were chatting before the class, and I was going, what the fuck's this? Like this perimenopause thing. And everybody got talking about it. And one of my students said, go and see this woman. She's like a menopause specialist and she'll sort you out. And so I went off to see her and got myself some HRT, which has just given me, again, my life back. I'm so grateful because this is only the end of last year. I think if this whole corona thing had come about last year before I'd been to see her and got the HRT, I think I would have gone down a lot faster. I think I'm just happy that I was in a relatively good, energized place to kind of deal with it better. But I mean, that's something as well that I wanted to mention in this podcast, because I've done podcasts before, but I didn't have this awareness then. But
you hear it here first.
Yeah. Well, no, what I want to get across to people, because, I mean, whether you're a young man like you might have a mother that's been through this, you might have a sister that's going to go through this, you might one day have a wife that will go through this. It's really hard. This menopause thing is not to be taken lightly. Do you know that women of my age, 50 to 54, are at the highest risk of suicide in all women? Like, it's really hard because serotonin and estrogen are like connected. They go kind of hand in hand. So when your estrogen starts to go down, your serotonin goes down, which is your feel good, happy hormone. So I don't know why I've gone off on a tangent.
No, but it's interesting.
It is interesting. It's really interesting.
I can only empathize because clearly I'm not an expert in menopause, and I likely never will be.
No.
But
no.
You know, I suppose in one sense it must be quite a self-devaluating part of a woman's life. I don't know. It seems to be a big transition.
Yeah, I think it really can be. I did. I would find myself sitting at the kitchen table going, well, that's it then. That was life. It's all over for me now. And then I'd go, where is this coming from? Because I love my job and I've got loads of things I want to do. And what is going on with me? It was only that, like, I was 50. So it's like, there's no denying that. And the fact that I had some changes in my monthly cycle, and I was kind of like, okay, something's going on, that I thought, oh, maybe it is happening to me. And now that I've got some more estrogen, I'm like, wow, it really was happening, and I feel so much better. And so I suppose if people are listening and we're talking about mental health and I'm talking about my journey, and this has been a big part of it, I would never have gone back into an eating disorder. I'm not at any risk of anything like that, but I did have moments where I thought, I feel really bloody depressed and I don't know what's wrong with me. So if somebody listening to this is of a certain age, and this can start at 40 and it can go on for 10 years, woohoo, there are options out there. Don't suffer. And I think people don't talk about menopause because it's almost like saying, yeah, like I'm an old woman now or whatever. They feel like there's stigma. People don't want to talk about periods. People don't want to talk about, whereas like I'll do the talking.
And what advice would you give, let's say, to maybe partners, to men, children, friends of people going through menopause? How could you best interact with a woman going through that phase that can give her the best platform?
Oh, I think have some empathy. Like, don't say things like, what's wrong with you? You're hysterical. Or, I think just know that it's actually really hard. I think obviously my mum's passed away. I can't ask her. I do remember that my mum went on HRT. I do remember that she also went on antidepressants. And what happens is women go to doctors, and doctors don't, not all doctors, but they don't often specialize in menopause and hormones. So a woman will go age 50, whatever, to the doctor and say, I feel really depressed. And they might say, well, your kids are growing up and, whatever, and we'll give you antidepressants. And what they need is hormones, not antidepressants. So they're wrongly diagnosed. They're diagnosed with depression when actually it's perimenopause. And it's not the menopause bit where your period stops. It's the build up to that where you're just in chaos. And if you look at, I've gone and studied this because this is my overthinking, perfectionistic tendencies. If you look at a graph of hormone changes in puberty and then look at the graph of hormone changes in perimenopause, it's way more in perimenopause, but nobody talks about it. So if you've got a teenager that's moody, oh yeah, they're going through puberty. That's fine. But if you've got a woman who is raising kids, working, going through perimenopause, maybe dealing with elderly parents and all of that, it's really fucking hard. And that's all I'll say. So be patient with them and be understanding is what I would say.
And that's all we can do, I think, and it probably links back. I mean, whether it is something like menopause or whether it's something like somebody going through a grieving process, somebody going through anything, not so nice, is empathize, connect, see how we're not too far away from them at all. And just to hit back on a previous point, the HRT you're relating to, that's hormone replacement therapy, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. I'm getting a low dose of estrogen and progesterone, and I was terrified. I'm not going to lie. I just thought, oh my God, I can't take HRT. It'll give me breast cancer. And actually, the research and the testing that was done on HRT that suggested the link between it and breast cancer was done on a different kind of. It was actually hormones taken from horses' urine. They don't use that here. It's banned in Europe. I think it's still used in America in some places. But the HRT that I have is taken from yams. And it's probably a lot more identical. It's either identical or it's not, isn't it? But it's more identical to what your body creates itself. And so it's generally much safer. And I have the estrogen through a patch on my skin. So it's not going through my whole body. It's going in through the skin. And actually what I didn't realize is, yes, there are some small risks, 2% increased risk of breast cancer, which if you are a smoker would be 10%. And if you were very overweight would be 24%. So it's 2%. And also, there are lots of things that it helps with. So it reduces the risk of Alzheimer's, heart disease, bone loss. There's lots of benefits as well to HRT, which we don't hear about. So I feel good about it at the moment. I feel like I've made the right decision for me. And I feel like I don't now feel like my life is over at 50. I feel like I've got some great stuff to come. So there's some benefits.
You do, and that's a great message. I think, I work with a lot of old people with different conditions and stuff like that, and there is this kind of gathering sense that, this lack of adaptability, this lack of agency, and it seems the more older we get, the more into comfort we get, and the more, we rely on other people to do stuff for us. But it's that whole idea, again, if the ball is coming at your face, you can throw up your hand and catch it. You can duck, you can dive, you can dodge. You can do all of these things. And that process, it never stops in life. It certainly slows down as we get older, but it doesn't stop. And I think for too many people out there, we feel as if it stopped. And, oh, I'm old, and, the excuses come out. I might ask somebody comes to me and they say, oh, I have a sore knee. And I go, which one is it? They say, oh, it's the left one. And I'd ask them, I said, what do you think it is? And they might say, oh, it's old age.
Yeah.
And I say, right, what age is the other knee?
Yeah.
And it's just these little.
It's true, and I see it. I see a lot of it is. It's a state of mind. It's like if you think it's all over, it's all over. You're not going to look for opportunities, and it's. But I mean, the scary thing was that I found myself doing that. I found myself thinking, well, that's it then. I just get old then and just kind of drop off the face of the earth because I just was so tired. And I was still teaching, I was still doing, and enjoying it, but just really tired. And I don't feel like that anymore. But so I think I'm glad that I've had this opportunity to talk about that, because that's my latest thing, is that everywhere I look now, I see menopausal women, and I want to go up to them and go, do you know what? Like, you can feel better. You can, this is, it's like I'm like some kind of dealer in HRT, but it's just been such a an interesting journey. And then I was talking recently at an event that was a money raiser for Pieta House, and I looked around the room. I was talking about yoga, but I was looking around the room, and I was thinking, all these women are of around that sort of age, 40 to 60. So I asked the person that had organised the event, can I just add in a little bit at the end? And I got up and I said to them, we're talking about Pieta House, which is all about suicide. And do you realise that we are the women that are at the highest risk of suicide? Because I don't think people realise that, but the statistics show it. It's so we're vulnerable, we're always vulnerable, but I think it's just nice to be able to talk about that, because like I've been through stages in my life where I've been vulnerable for other reasons, and this one kind of crept up on me, but it's just as important to flag it up, I think.
It is an interesting one, because I think many people, when it comes to suicide, we think, men commit suicide more than women, but few people know that actually more women attempt suicide than men do.
Yeah.
And maybe it stems back to the differences in personality traits. Like, men tend to be more aggressive with things, which you can also see in the likes of arguments or the likes of a dispute. Women tend to go a different way and men tend to go, let's say, the more aggressive way. But just because the end numbers on suicide are towards men, there's a lot of stuff going on for women.
And there's a lot of women suffering in silence, and there's a lot of that, going back to the small talk. Yeah, sure, I'm grand, and and I'm keeping busy, and I'm work, and blah blah blah, and then there's so much on their plate, and I mean, I know it's the same for men, but I just, I see in my students, I have a lot of female students, and they've got kids doing Leaving Cert, and they've got parents that are, they've got Alzheimer's and they're struggling with their health, and they've got it coming at them from both sides, and they're trying to work, and they're trying to, keep a house, and they're struggling with their hormones and trying to work out what the hell is going on with me. And, it's, I feel for women. I feel for men too, but I do feel for women. I think we are almost victims of our own making, in so much as we try and do it all, and we want to be able to work, we want to have our own lives, and we want to have a social life, and we want to have a good marriage, but we want to mind our parents, and we want to be there for our kids, and we split ourselves in so many different directions. I think that's what I love about yoga. It's really nice self-care. It's really, a lot of my students say to me, this is my time in the week for me, where I come and I lie down and I move my body and I breathe and I reconnect and I go away feeling centered and calm. And I just think, what a gift, to be able to facilitate people to feel like that.
Oh, it really is. And in my own journey, that the last few minutes of breath, and especially when we run yoga in my own studio, it can be quite hard to be still then, even if I'm participating, because you're thinking of all the outliers you must take into account and all of these things for after class and before class and for the next class. And really, we just need to be quiet. And again, this time, which is March 23rd, 2020, in the middle of the coronavirus, we're stuck inside our homes. We're probably shit sick of Instagram and shit sick of all these videos and blah blah blah. That this quietness allows us to go inside, and in essence, it's a wonderful opportunity. Yeah, there's a lot of horrible things happening with it, but
I put a post up there: when you can't go outside, go inside.
Yeah, and it's so true. And I suppose, hitting back on the menopausal stuff, I mean, for anyone listening out there, and maybe I need to look at this for myself, and I probably certainly do. I owe my mother and different women in my life a few apologies and a few kind of more, more honesty and authenticity. Is that, women create this vessel for life. They're great carers. They're definitely the more empathetic gender and so on. And I think that when, in particular, a woman is going through a phase like this, look, if nothing else, can we not offer that back to them in spades and just
Absolutely.
say, maybe you might realize it yourself, but do something small. A little thing can make a huge difference.
Yeah, like make the bloody dinner or something. Just do, go to, look, let me take over, and it's the small things, they all add up. But I think it's just to realize that, you might be looking at your mum or your sister or whoever it is and going, what the heck is wrong with her? Like, she's all over the place, but she probably doesn't know either. We're not always totally in control of everything that's going on for us. And I think that was that was what I didn't, that it really took me by surprise. This, sitting there going, oh, my life is over. And then at the same time going, but I love my life. What the hell? What the hell is wrong with me? And didn't for a minute think it was hormones. But now I look back, I think actually probably it had been going on for a couple of years, but yeah, the fact that I think I'm I don't know, 30 or 35 or something is just probably stopped me from. But also the fact that women don't talk about it. Like, I haven't been around a group of women talking about perimenopause at all. It just hasn't. And actually, I'm the one that's starting the conversations. And I just had a friend that was put on anti-anxiety medication, and I'm saying to her, get your hormones checked, or go and see somebody that knows.
Yeah. So, ladies, if you're listening, get your answers ready, because I'm going to be asking you all about your menopause and your flows and your different things, just to help normalize that conversation. Because you're dead right. It does. I think it needs to be normalized, much like anything bloody else. Young men or different things going through different phases of their life. It's the same thing.
Well, every single woman in the world, if they live to be this age, will go through it. So why is nobody talking about it? And also, actually, because you're working with people who are exercising, and maybe there's a point where they really can't do as much. You can't push them as hard. They need to rest. They need to, listen in. I mean, that's the other thing, is that I just felt physically like I was, I was more drained. So I guess, we tend to try and push through things, don't we? And I certainly have that element to my personality where I think I'll just keep pushing through, and sometimes you just can't. And the best thing you can do, go to bed, sleep, rest, have a bath,
There's a lot to be said for something as simple as rest and protein. I mean, get those two things into you, and that can help you rejuvenate. No, of course, you don't want it to be a scenario that you're just avoiding what's going on.
No.
Because people can do that too. People can go into their bubbles or go into rest, and it's to avoid the stimulus. It's to avoid all of that. But it's more a loving rest, that kind of a one with gratitude, a one from the heart, that kind of way.
It's, and I mean, coming back around way full circle again, is what I wasn't giving to myself when I was anorexic was nourishment. And what I've had to learn is how to nourish myself. And I'm very good at giving my energy out to other people. I think I give a lot of myself in general. And I think that I will push myself, and I have all of those kind of traits in my personality, but nourishing myself has been harder. And I think what I'm realizing now is the nourishment that I needed then obviously was good food and calories, but the nourishment that I was craving and the nourishment that was causing the issues was actually emotional. And I mean, there's so many different ways we can nourish ourselves, and yoga is one of the ways that I nourish myself. And I like to have an Epsom salt bath, and I like to curl up with the dog, and go for a walk, and there's so many different ways we can get nourishment. But I think I really encourage people to be honest about what their needs are, and work out how to meet those needs. And what I was doing when I was binging was I was trying to meet my needs through eating junk food, which I think a lot of people do. We feel lonely, we grab a bag of crisps, and then what I was doing when I was anorexic was like the opposite, and actually sort of trying to kid myself that I had no needs, that I was totally in control, and I don't even need food. Look at me. Look at you. You can't resist food. I'm above all of that. I have no needs. And of course I have needs. But I think it was, as I said, it was finding balance. It was realizing it's okay to have needs. And then the biggest learning of my life is not to expect somebody else to fulfill those needs, but to learn how to do that for myself. And that's kind of where I am now. I think actually yesterday I ended up having a bit of a, not really an argument, but a moment with my husband. And I realized afterwards that I'd got upset because I was needing something from him, but I wasn't asking for that need to be met. And also I was angry with him because he couldn't fulfill it. And actually what I realized was I can actually fulfill this need myself. I actually don't need to put these expectations onto other people, but I need to learn to be there for me. And I find that hard. And I think people do in general.
It's this idea of, stand up straight with your shoulders back. Our strength comes from our vulnerability.
Yeah.
If we stand up straight with our shoulders back, so to speak, we're exposing our most vulnerable part,
Yeah.
which is in a physical sense, our belly. But what that's saying to the world is it's saying, look, I am vulnerable, but I'm ready to take you on.
Do you know, that's interesting that you said that, because if you think about that standing up with your, eye open, that's the same as, when I said about I couldn't lie in Shavasana, I couldn't lie in relaxation when I first came to yoga.
Yeah.
And because if you think about that position, you're lying flat on your back, legs apart, arms wide, totally vulnerable, all of your organs exposed. And I was kind of traumatized at that time with grief and whatever and loss. And I was, and so to lie on the floor like that for me was just too much. It was just too much. I was too exposed. And I see that in some of my students. And it's just an interesting point, because I know you've got yoga in your place now. And if you see people and they're fidgeting and their eyes are open and closed and their hands are on their belly and at the sides and on their belly, and they're, maybe they're feeling exposed like that. And I'll often say to people, put a blanket over you, or maybe turn to your side, or it's a lot to lie on your back on the floor with your eyes closed, because ultimately we're animals, aren't we? And how many animals do that unless they're really, really safe?
Unless they're the lion or the peak predator, and that's...
Well, yeah, but even then, actually lying on your front, face down, feels a lot safer for most people, I think, because then all your organs are... So, on those kind of levels as well, like you say, the energetic level, it's all going on, So, yeah, we are exposed. And I think there is, when you get to that point where you can stand and just be open and be vulnerable, it is very brave. It's very courageous, I think. Brené Brown is amazing. Do you follow?
Brené Brown, is it?
Yeah, she's amazing. She's an American woman. She did a TED Talk years ago, and it kind of catapulted her into fame, really. And she's a Netflix program. I think it's like about 90 minutes long. And it's her just talking to an audience, but oh my God, she's amazing. And she talks a lot about that the real courage lies in vulnerability.
Yeah. And which we're probably seeing at the moment with this phenomenon, because there's a lot of people who may not go to a yoga class or a gym session or whatever, because they're anxious about it. They don't want to, show their vulnerability, bearing their flaws. But while we're having this kind of increase now in kind of online classes, there seems to be this trend towards people that previously wouldn't go to a class in person that are going to that,
Yeah, and the stuff that's available online is a great way into it, because you get to sort of see what goes on in the class and try it in the safety of your own home. And I hope after this that there will be a lot more people that will come to classes, because there's nothing, it's great doing a class online, but there's nothing nicer than sharing a space with a group of other people, building that community and practicing together. It's really special. I don't know, for you all to sit up at the end of a class and feel connected to yourself and connected to each other, I think we need more of that. And that's one of the things about this whole situation that I think is really hard. Humans don't do well in isolation.
Yeah, we need each other.
Yeah, we do need each other. And I think as many ways as we can to connect is really important to keep those going. I'm trying to put out videos and things on my Facebook page, and one or two people have commented saying, somebody messaged me and said, I heard your voice and I cried. And she said, I miss it so much. And, but it was so nice to feel connected to you. And, it's hard for people, but whatever we can do is...
Yeah, well, we'll keep jumping on and striving on and facing it, facing the chaos regardless.
Yeah.
Now, at risk of heading into another one of our 3-hour
I
conversations.
know, yeah, we are, aren't we? Really?
Which we could do a Joe Rogan on it today. But we might leave it there, because I'm conscious you're in the car recording.
And my husband's come home actually whilst I've been sat here and giving me a funny look and gone into the house to go and get some lunch.
I hope you have a window cracked and you're not suffocating in there. But so Louise, before you go, you might tell people kind of where to find you, what kind of projects you have going on at the moment, and how people can get involved with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, my yoga studio is Douglas Yoga Centre, which is right in the middle of Maryborough Woods housing estate. And obviously, I've had to close the studio due to coronavirus. So there's a bit of, I'm sure you're the same, there's a bit of stress there in terms of how to keep paying the rent and the rates and the bills and all of that stuff. But in the meantime, to look after my students and anybody else that wants to get involved, I've set up, I have a Facebook page, Yoga with Louise George, and I've set up another group, kind of like a private group called Yoga with Louise Online. And I'm just firing classes and relaxations and breathing techniques out into that group now. And basically, I'm just saying if anybody can contribute a few euros here and there, make a donation. I've given people different ways to do that in the hope that there'll still be a studio there for us all to come back and practice in together. I have Instagram, yoga_with_Louise. And I'm fairly active on there, and anybody can contact me that way. Other than that, I mean, normally I would have been teaching classes away all through the week. I teach, chair yoga and hatha yoga. I'm big into mobility, combining mobility with yoga. That's one of my passions at the moment as well. So, but I'm going to try and put all of that goodness into my videos and put them in my group for now. So, somebody actually asked me this morning, can I subscribe to your yoga channel or whatever? And I thought, yeah, I don't have one and I don't know how that's going to work, but maybe that will come. I don't know. Who knows?
So there's another opportunity that sprouted up.
Yeah, but usually, I mean, when all things are normal, douglasyogacentre.ie is the website with the schedule on and the timetable, and hopefully we'll be back to classes sooner rather than later, but we'll have to wait and see. But online is the only way to go in the meantime.
Yeah, well, I suppose we'll leave it there, but all I can wish for you is, look, as these chaotic weeks keep unfolding, and I know I don't even need to wish it too much upon you because I know you're of the right mentality, but that you're going to, continue to kick ass and continue to find where you can be of service to the world, because the world is a better place when you do that, and that's something that I'd be very, very open and honest about. I love pretty much everything you do, and it's absolutely great to have you on the show again. So I just want to give you my gratitude for that.
Thanks, Jen. Thank you.
Yeah, and we shall be meeting in some busy, absolutely full of people cafe sometime soon, I'm sure, and then we can go full Joe Rogan. We might even bring the microphones along if the waitresses and waiters don't mind.
Yeah. Well, if whoever has made it to the end of this, I mean, fair play to you.
Well, no, we kept them going. So Louise, I shall chat to you later, and be good to yourself.
And you. Bye.
So that's all for today, folks. I hope you enjoyed this beautiful conversation as much as me. If you'd like to get in touch with Louise, remember you can get her at Instagram. She is yoga_with_Louise. You can also find her website, that's douglasyogacentre.ie. If you like what we do here in the show, give us a like, give us a subscribe. You can find us on Instagram, that's at LifeFitStudios. You can find my personal page, that's at jackohalloran_ie, or you can also find our website, that is lifefitstudios.ie. If you like this conversation and you'd like to hear more, we would absolutely be hugely, hugely grateful if you could support us on Patreon. Every little bit counts over there, and you can find us. We are the Life Fit Podcast. So that is all. I wish you well. I wish that you enjoy your time in quarantine. Look after your loved ones. Be good to your fellow humans and stay safe out there. Yours in help, Jack O'Halloran.